Hey, in this video I want to review some popular Bootstrap elements, how to get started with Bootstrap, things like that. We're going to be working with HTML5 boilerplate, so if you want to follow along, go to initializer.com, click on the classic HTML5 boilerplate button, uncheck everything except for the jQuery minified, modernizer, and node template, and then go ahead and click the download button and you should be good to go. So this is the project, the HTML5 boilerplate files opened in my text editor. I'm using Sublime Text, but you can use any text editor you wish. I just renamed it to Bootstrap on my end. And by default, if you pull up this page in a browser, it just has this hello world text and that's it. So for now, what we're going to do is get rid of it. And because we're working locally, we're going to include HTTP S here just so we can get the jQuery to work for us. On a server, you don't necessarily need to do that. The next thing we want to do is, because we're working with Bootstrap, you can click on the Get Started page, and on here you'll see that there's some CDNs available for us. So for Bootstrap, we will need a link to their CSS and a link to their JavaScript. So we have links here that we can just grab. So copy the link to the style sheet here, and right above in your HTML, right above normalize and main.css, go ahead and include your link to the style sheet to Bootstrap. And now we also need to include a link to the JavaScript as well, so copy that, scroll to the very bottom. So right after the jQuery link, go ahead and include your JavaScript link and a link to your own JavaScript file as well. This all comes with HTML5 boilerplate. Once you have that good to go, we can start by editing the HTML and including some Bootstrap elements. Okay, so just bear in mind, if you're on the Bootstrap website, if you go to the CSS page here and you scroll down, you'll see a lot of code samples here and things like that. So we'll go ahead and use some of these code samples in our project just so you can see Bootstrap in action. Keep in mind, Bootstrap is a library of different styles and different JavaScript functionality you can just use right away without having to code any of it in your own CSS. So it's all kind of built into Bootstrap as long as you have links to their CSS and their JavaScript files, which we do. So now we can go ahead inside our body tag, include a section, and we give this a class of container. Bear in mind, you can also include a class of container-fluid, and the only difference there is if you have this here is that it does not include padding. So let's just go ahead and use container in our case, include a note here, a closing note as well. Perfect. So here's our container. In here we'll also include a header. We'll give this a class of page header. Cool. Close that. Include an H1 tag in here. We'll just do this introduction to Bootstrap. Close that as well. Indent that in. Save that. Let's refresh the page and see what we got. Nice. There's our nice Bootstrap large text in a header. Excellent. So the next thing we want to include is something called a Jumbotron. So a Jumbotron is like a section that's very large. It includes the text in there is very large and includes some background styling as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Jumbotron. Close that. And inside Jumbotron, we'll just include some placeholder text. Lorem. Hit the tab key if you're on Sublime Text. A lot of text there let you do that. You'll type in lorem and then you just hit the tab key and I'll just go ahead and create that for you as well. Okay, let's go ahead and tab that in, save that, refresh the page, and there we are with a nice background color. Now, one thing you'll notice is that this has a darker background color than you might have on your end. The only thing is I went inside my main.css and I targeted Jumbotron and it gave it a different color. So this is how you would change it. So if I were to comment this out, for instance, save that, refresh the page, you see that on my screen it's a little bright, so I don't necessarily see the background color. But if you use the inspector, you'll see that this Jumbotron here has a background color by default, which is right over here, and it's a light gray, very light gray. So what I did on my end, I went inside the CSS folder, main.css, scroll to the very bottom, to the middle portion, if you will, target the Jumbotron and give it a different color just so it's a little bit darker on my screen. So this is how you would customize. And so because we included our link to our custom style sheet right over here after the link to the Bootstrap style sheet, we can override it just by the nature of CSS cascading style sheets. Because our styles came afterwards, it just overrides the default styles. And that's how you would style your or modify the default Bootstrap styling. And with Bootstrap, you can also include buttons. So let's inside our Jumbotron right over here. They have some default button styles. So let's include a p tag. Close that. Cool. And let's include an anchor link. And this is just going to be where our buttons are going to be. So I'm going to just say button 1 and another anchor link here. And we'll call this button 2. Excellent. So if you just save this, refresh the page, they'll just look like regular links inside Jumbotron, meaning that they're a little bit larger. But what we want to do is actually create buttons. So for that, inside the CSS documentation page on the Bootstrap website, if you click on buttons, you'll be directed right to the button section. So the first thing you'll have to do is identify them as a button. And so you would do that by a couple of things. So you'll have to specify that the role is button, and you'll also have to give it a class of button. So let's go ahead and do that now. Class btn, give this a role of button. Cool. And we'll do the exact same thing to the button below it. Make sure to include that closing quote there. Save that, refresh the page, and now that they're buttons, now they're inside this gray box, so you can't really see the button styles, if you will. So what I'm actually going to do is go back inside our main.css and go ahead and comment this portion out. Perfect. Just so we can see the buttons a little bit better. Okay, so now what we have is the buttons there, but we don't have any styling around it. So for that, what we need to do is include the type of styling. So here's our choices here. We have a default, we have primary, success, info, warning, danger, and then just a simple link. This is basically what we have right now, more or less. So what we want to do is do button default. This is the class here. So go back into your index.html. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back in. And put in here btn default. Save that, go back and refresh the page, and then there's our default button right over here. Cool. And for the second button, you could do, if we come back to our styling in here, you could do button primary. So let's do that now. Inside this class, you would do button primary. Save that, come back and refresh the page. Cool, so now we have two different buttons. So say you want to have different sizes for the buttons, you can also do that with Bootstrap. So if you scroll down, you'll see the different sizes that are available to us. So we have button large, we have button small, things like that. Here's the classes right over here that you can fit into your HTML. So let's do button large, and then we'll do button small, just so you can see the difference. So the first one we'll do btn. It's gonna be LG. Cool. And then we want to do on the other one btn small. Save that, come back, refresh the page. You'll see one is now larger than the other. This has got smaller. So you can do things like that really easy, very quickly, without having to do any of your own CSS styles. The next thing I want to show you is the grid system. So Bootstrap comes with a pretty robust grid system, if you will. So I'm going to scroll over here to the grid system section. So remember, if you're on the CSS page here, you can click on the grid system. It'll take you right to it and give you some information about it. In general, this comes with 4 different breakpoints. So we have extra small, small, medium, large. And so what we need to do is just keep in mind that these columns here, so each of these represents a column, they have to add up to 12. And you can have them divided up any way you wish, as long as they add up to 12. Now, they don't necessarily have to add up to 12, but what ends up happening then is that you don't have the columns fit into the space provided. So the space provided is meant for 12 columns. And the way you would use these classes here is that for each breakpoint, extra small, small, medium, large, you would have different configurations, because on a wider screen you can have maybe more columns. On a narrower screen you can have less columns, and then the other columns will just stack into a different row, things like that. So you would need to include styles for that, very important. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So after this section where the Jumbotron is, so I'm going to copy this class here and make sure we put a note here at the end. Cool. let's do another section, and we'll call this section row. Now, again, this row is a Bootstrap class. So a lot of the classes here, I'm not making them up. These are a part of Bootstrap. So the first thing you need to do is include the row. So this is going to be a row. Now we need to include our columns. So for each column, let's go ahead and do that now. So div class column large. It's going to have three column. It's going to say 3 spaces, if you will. Okay. Column medium, it's going to take up 3 spaces as well. Column small is going to take up 6 spaces in that row, and then column extra small is going to take up 12. Okay, and inside this div, I'm just going to give this a note. Let's go ahead and include an H2 column 1. Okay, I'm going to indent this as well, and I'm also going to include a paragraph text as well, some placeholder copy, just so we can see what that looks like. Close that as well. So in here we just have 1 column. At the large breakpoint, this takes up 3 spaces. At the medium breakpoint, this also takes up 3 spaces, and at the small breakpoint, it takes up 6 spaces, and the extra small takes up 12. So meaning that here it's all going to be on 1 row. Here we're going to add more columns to this as well. It's actually going to divide it into 2, which means they're going to stack, and then this is just going to have each column go from edge to edge all the way across. So let's see what that looks like in action. So I'm going to copy this here. So 1, 2, 3. Save that. Make sure to update these numbers here for each of the columns, just so you can see that they're all different columns. 3, and this is 2. Okay, save that. Let's refresh the page and see what we got. There we go, with column 1, column 2, column 3, and 4. And so as you reduce the width of this container, you'll see that the breakpoints change. So this is the medium breakpoint, and this is the small breakpoint. Here we have 6, meaning this takes up 6 spaces, and this also takes up 6 spaces. Remember, these two have to add up to 12, and so on and so forth. So if you reduce this further, you'll see that they stack on top of each other. Nice. So what ends up happening, a very common thing that might end up happening, is that if you have less text in column 2, I'll show you what ends up happening. So I'm just going to erase some text here just to lessen that. Okay, refresh the page here, so there's less text over here. So as we reduce this to here, you'll see this little giant gap over here. So how can we address that? How can we fix that? So the first thing we're going to do is locate where this happens first. So this actually happens after column 2. So in this space here, we would need to fix this. So keep in mind, Bootstrap works with CSS float. So these are all floated elements. So we would have to use a clearfix class to fix that for us. So this comes with styles just for that class for us. So what we need to do is include another div container. It's going to be an empty div container after column 2. Div class clearfix visible, and this is only going to be visible to us at the small breakpoint, which is right over here, because this is where the problem happens. We don't really need to see this in effect in any other breakpoint but that. So include this container, save it, refresh it, and there we are. Now we have a fixed, we don't have that gap anymore. Okay, and then you have to go back to the same breakpoints as well. Cool. So with that, I want to show you how you can hide things depending on the breakpoint. So if you have a mobile responsive website, you may want to hide certain elements when you get to different breakpoints in your layout, things like that. So I'll show you how to do that with Bootstrap. So let's create another section, give it a class of row, close that as well, make a little note for ourselves. Okay, and in here what we want to do is a series of divs, and we're going to, and there each of them is going to have some text inside that we're going to hide at different breakpoints. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm just going to scroll up a bit here. Class of, this is going to be called well, hidden, extra small. Okay, and then we want to do hidden small, and then we also want to do hidden medium. So meaning we want to hide this everywhere but the large breakpoint. Okay, so in here what we want to do is put a paragraph tag just so we can see what it is we're talking about here. So this is going to be 1200 pixels and up. Cool. Next thing we want to do is div class well as well, hidden, extra small, and we want to hide this small as well. Okay, paragraph tag, 992 pixels and up. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is another well, class well. It's going to be hidden, extra small. Get a paragraph tag, and in here we'll have 768 pixels and up. Close that as well. Cool. And if you go back over here, refresh the page, you'll see there are different wells. Now remember, I used the well class, so it has this little border around it, so that way you can see the outlines. And so as I reduce this, as you can see, everything here is now visible because we don't have hidden large on any of these. So as I reduce this, you'll see this disappear, and then this will disappear, and then finally this will disappear as narrower the viewport container gets. So let's see this in action. So now we have 2 here, and let's keep going. Now we have just the 1 there, and keep going. Now they're all gone as well. So you can see that just like that, you can choose to have some elements be displayed at certain breakpoints and hidden at different breakpoints. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is how to offset. So earlier I was mentioning that using the grid system, you need to have all the columns add up to 12, so you take up all the space that's available to you. But what if you're in a situation where that's not the case? You don't want to necessarily take up all the space that's available to you. You just want to take up a portion of the space. So here's how we could do that here. So section, class, oops, spell that right. Give this row, put a comment here as well. Okay. Perfect. So what we want to do is include a div. This is going to be our column. So column medium, it's going to be 6 spaces. Column, let's keep it 6 spaces for now. I'll include the offset class in just a second. Okay, I'm going to scroll here just at the top in here. Put our closing column here as well. Give this an H2. Call this one offset example. Okay, let's go ahead and indent that as well. Let's put a paragraph tag with some placeholder text. Excellent. Save that. So if we view this on the page now, you'll see that here's the text, and it doesn't take up all the space here to the right. But let's say you want to have all this text appear here on the right hand side. So here's how we would do that. So inside our class over here, what we want to do is include another class, column. At the medium breakpoint, we want to offset this by 6. Save that, refresh the page. So there it is, offset. So in medium, meaning that the medium breakpoint and up, it's going to be offset by 6. As I reduce this, now we end up the full width. The narrower that we get, we end up taking up the full width. So maybe on a desktop display, you want to have a layout where this is offset to the right, and then but then on a narrow display, you want to just have everything stack them, and then take up as much real estate space that's available to you. So you could do that as well. So although Bootstrap comes with some default styles, they may not quite align with the styles or font choices, things like that you were going for in your particular layout. So my preferred method is to include a link to Bootstrap's CSS using their CDN, and then using your own style sheet and overwrite any of those default styles. And the reason why I like to do that is because the link to their CDN, this includes a version of this particular style sheet. You may want to update this maybe in your project in the future. So if you end up modifying their existing code, that'll become difficult for you to upgrade. Now, you don't necessarily have to do that, because maybe, let's say, for instance, you want to keep your code very lean, you don't want to add any more code to it, things like that. You can download the source code, and when you do, you get this folder, and if you look under this dist for distribution, if you will, you'll see the CSS. You can copy this bootstrap.css, and let's just go and open that here, and you'll see here's all the default styles in here. So you can copy all these styles into your project and then modify anything here that you would like to modify. So you can definitely do that. That's available to you. But again, if you do this, it'll be more difficult for you to upgrade should you ever want to do that. So that's a decision you'll have to make. This way, in this approach where you link to their CDN, link to their style sheet CDN, here at the top here, you can, in your own styles, overwrite all the default styles and not worry about not being able to upgrade in the future. Because let's say they add a new feature that you would like to take advantage of, things like that, it'll become more difficult for you. So this is another another option for you. So earlier you saw that we were able to update the background Jumbotron color. So let's go ahead and just update that further just so you can see. Color white, save that, come back to my project here, refresh the page, here it is in green. And the next thing you want to do, let's say you want to target each of these headings here. So the way I find it really simple to do is using the Chrome inspector. So if you want to, let's say, change the styles here, so what you do is you put your cursor in that element there, over that element, click inspect. This way it'll select this element and you'll see all the styles that are being applied to it right over here. As you can see, just a side note, Bootstrap is using pixels here, not rems or M, so keep that in mind. So what we want to do is, let's say, target all the H2 tags, and let's give it a color of red, for instance. Save that, refresh the page, and now you'll see all the H2 tags have turned to red. So just like that, you could change different default styles and colors just by modifying your CSS right over here. Okay. So Bootstrap does come with a lot of great JavaScript utilities that you can use. So if you head over to the JavaScript panel here, what I'm looking for is the carousel. Let's look for that. Here it is right over here. Click on that, and here's a carousel that comes with Bootstrap, so you can use this directly on your page. So you don't need to download any jQuery plugins. You don't have to program your own slideshow. Bootstrap comes with a great one with lots of great options. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to use placeholder.com for my images in here, so you can do that if you're following along as well. So inside index.html, I'm going to do this right above. Let's do it right above, rather below Jumbotron. Let's go ahead and create our slideshow. So let's do a section. We need to give this an ID because we're going to reference this section this is for JavaScript purposes. Carousel example, let's just carousel slides, let's call it that. Cool. And let's give this a class of carousel. And this is going to be a slide. Let's give it, we need to give it a data attribute, ride, carousel. Cool, let's close that section here. Let's give this a closing here. Carousel. Remember, all of this documentation is available for you right over here, so you can see exactly how to put this together, what the elements are, its usage, things like that. Great reference. So definitely have your bookmark all of these pages for you. Okay, so once you create your first sort of a container for your carousel, we have a carousel slides as the ID. Give it a carousel class, slide effect, data ride carousel. Cool. So remember, this is all taken from the Bootstrap documentation right over here. Cool. So the next thing we need to do is create our the little dots, if you will, that help us navigate between each of the slides. This is going to be an ordered list, so OL class carousel indicators. Close that ordered list there. Our first LI item, I'm going to go ahead and indent this in here. Inside this LI, we want to give it a data target. Okay, target that ID. In our case, we're using carousel slides as the ID right over here, so just go ahead and copy that right there. Cool. And we want to give this a data slide to 0. So remember, it's going to be starting at 0. In other words, that's the first slide, so starting at 0. And we want to give this a class of active, meaning this is going to be the first slide that's selected, and then close this list item here. Okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and copy that here, paste that in here, and the only difference between these other slides is that you want to get rid of this class of active, remove that here as well, because we just want to have active just on one of them. The next thing we want to do is change this to 1, and then change this one to 2. Save that. Okay, so now we have our numbers. Now we actually need our slides. So let's go ahead and do that now. So div class carousel. It's going to be inner. Remember, these are all Bootstrap classes that we're using here. So div class item. So this is the carousel item. We'll call this one active because this is going to be the selected one. Select both of these elements, indent that in. Put a little note for myself here. Item, cool. And let's go ahead and now let's put our div class slide 1. Okay. Slide 1, cool. And we want to give this an image. Remember, we're using placeholder, so it's with image source. So if you look inside here, you can grab this sample example here. So copy this right over here, drop that in there. Great, and this is 350 by 150. It's kind of small, so I'm gonna change this to 1200 by 500. Excellent. So there's going to be our slide image. So we want to do the same thing to the other slides as well. So I'll actually go ahead and we can actually delete this here. This is being a little redundant, so just to keep it a little bit clean. So let's remove that as well. And oops, let's move a little bit of that extra space there. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy this as well. So we have 3 of them, 2, 3, and then one thing we need to definitely do is move this active class and just keep it on the first one, just like we did on the indicators up here, class active. Save that, cool. Okay, so if we go ahead and refresh this now on our page, here's our slideshow right over here, using the placeholder images. So I didn't have to install any plugins, any jQuery plugins, any JavaScript. It just works just by including the appropriate classes, things like that. Also, you may want to include some arrows for previous and next, for instance. So let's go ahead and do that now. So this is all inside the carousel section container. A class left carousel control. Okay, and let's give this href, and this is going to be targeting our carousel ID. So this is it here, carousel slide. So keep that in mind. This is referencing that. Cool. We need to give this a role of button. Great. And it's going to be data slide. In our case, it's going to be previous. So prev is what we need to include. Excellent. Close this anchor link, and inside of here we're going to include a span. Okay, class, it's going to be a glyph, and we're going to review glyphs in a second, but essentially it's an icon. Let's go ahead and do that now. Glyph icon. So first thing you want to do is use glyph icon, then you want to specify what kind of glyph icon you want to use. So glyph icon chevron left aria hidden equals true, and the reason why we're including this attribute aria hidden is to hide this element from screen readers because it's not relevant to them. Okay, and next thing we want to do is close the span tag here, and then we want to do span class, and we're going to do SR only, meaning this will only be visible to screen readers. We're going to do previous. Okay, screen readers, so those who are viewing the page who are using a screen reader to read back the content, they'll be able to see this portion here just for screen readers only with the previous text, and then we'll hide this, the glyph, the actual icon, from screen readers by using aria hidden equals true. Cool, save that. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Okay, and the only difference is for this one here, this is going to be class. In our case, it's going to be right. Carousel control, roll button, everything stays the same. And here, instead of pref for previous, we want to have next. And we want to change this glyph icon. Make sure we spell this right here. So update that here, and then update that, let's see here. Update here as well. Change this to glyph right as well. Save that and make sure this is saying next as well for screen readers. Okay, that should be good to go. Let's refresh the page, and we have arrows to the right and an arrow to the left as well. So very easily you can modify that. You can change these glyphs, and I'll show you how to add different glyphs and utilize that with Bootstrap as well. Okay, another cool element that Bootstrap comes with are glyphs. So if you click into components and you're in the components section, you'll see all the different glyphs that are available to you. So you can include these glyphs anywhere on your page where it's appropriate. And so the way you would include this element, so you would need to include a span just like we did on a slideshow. And in our case, I'm going to go back to the buttons over here. Let's add these glyphs inside our buttons. So in here we'll include a span, close that span. And let's say for this button, we want to have this house icon. So the first thing you need to do is include glyphy icon and then glyphy home after that. So copy that, go inside here, class, paste that in, save it, and then go back to your page. And just like that, there's your icon right over here. Let's do the same thing for button 2. And instead of doing button small, let's make it large just so we can see it there. There it is. And inside here, you can look for a different icon that you would like to use in your buttons, for instance. As long as it's inside a span, let's use that question mark there. And inside of our link here, after the button 2 text, let's include another span. Close that span, include a class inside with glyph icon, and then glyph icon question sign. Save that, come back to our page, refresh it, and there's our question mark and our house in here. Just like that, very easy. You can pick out different icons that you want to use. And the last thing I want to show you is a navigation bar. So Bootstrap does come with some great navigation options for you. So if you on the components page, if you click on navs, you'll be taken to the nav section, and there you have you can do things like tabs, you can do things like pills. So it looks a little buttons like this. You can do drop downs, you can do justified, lots of different options. So here's a drop down example here, and these are all fully responsive. You have the nav bar option as well. So here's the nav bar section. Here's the whole example of what the nav bar section looks like, and if you reduce this in size, you'll see that it automatically conforms to a mobile responsive layout, if you will. So there it is right here as a mobile layout as well. So it's a really powerful feature to use. So we'll just do a nice quick example just so you can see this in action. So let's go ahead and head over to our index.html, and what we want to do is just create sort of a nav list that looks something like this here. So let's go ahead and do that, and in here what I'll do is include drop down as well. So this is going to be a very popular thing that we can include. So inside index.html at the very top after header right over here, let's go ahead and include a nav class of let's give this not nav, you're going to use the unordered list class, do list inline. So instead of a list going down, this is going to be on one row. Give this a list item. We'll use a tab here. Cool. Okay, and we'll just go ahead and give ourselves a home link. Close that. Close that as well. The next one will be a list item. Okay. Okay, and this will be our, let's say, about. Cool. And let's do a drop down example. So list item class, you would do drop down. Close this list item. Inside this list item, we will need to do an A anchor link here. Go ahead and indent that in as well. So this is going to be our drop down link. So for instance, let's say you have get in touch with me. Let's do get in touch. So you'll have different options of how people can get in touch with you. So what's important here is we need to include some class specific elements in here that will allow this to become a drop down menu. So the first thing we're going to do is class drop down toggle. Okay, close that. Data attribute, data toggle drop down. Excellent. And then now in here, what we want to do is inside this anchor link, we want to have our drop down list. So unordered list will go inside this list item. Inside our unordered list in here, we will have some options to contact me. So let's do a list item, a ref, and let's say we have a phone. Let's say we have an email as well, and close the list item. Excellent. There's drop down here. We just need to include drop down menu, very important. So this is drop down menu right over here. Okay, oops, not in here. I meant right over here. Excellent. So this way it has a reference to it. So we have a list item with drop down. We have an anchor link right over here with the class of drop down toggle. We have a data attribute with a data toggle drop down. Get in touch is going to be the text that you would click on, and then you have a list unordered list, which represents the actual drop down menu, which with the class of drop down menu. We have phone and we have email. Save that, come back over here, refresh our page. So there's our link right over here. So if you click on get in touch, you'll see the drop down menu show up for us right over here. Here's our different links as well. And And that's it. So you can include different menus in here that you would like in your project. So one way to approach this, let's say you want a more sophisticated drop down. So here's one right over here with the search and things like that. So one way you could do this with a Bootstrap, you can copy this code example for yourself. Just makes it easy. And then just omit all the things that you don't want to use. So for instance, let's say after this unordered list example, let's paste that entire code in. Let's make sure that we indent everything nice and clean. Save that. Refresh the page, and there's that whole menu that we saw in the example. And if you reduce this in size, it's fully responsive, ready to go. Very easy. Now you would just go in here, just omit all the things you don't want to use. So for instance, let's say you don't want to use the search box and field. All we would need to do is look for that search element right over here. So let's see, here's our form right over here. So if you delete this from here, delete it, refresh it, it's gone. So just like that, you can very easily customize each of the elements to the way you would like the layout to be on your end. So all we need to do is use that inspector. Go ahead and inspect the elements that you want to change. So use that inspector here. Let's say we want to be able to change the border of our elements here. Let's say we want to change it to something different other than this color here. So let's go ahead and target this portion here, the portion that's not darkened out, if you will, or made lighter, because in other words this is not what's being selected. So let's go ahead and paste that into here, into our CSS. Let's give this a border, 2 pixels solid, and we'll give this green color. Save that, refresh the page, and there's that border. So for instance, if you want to do things like that, you just do it by using the inspector. That doesn't look very good, but you get the idea in terms of how you would be able to do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. Refresh the page, and that's it. So remember, there's a lot of different elements for you to choose from and use in your project. I would definitely encourage you to spend some time looking through all of their documentation pages, their CSS documentation pages. Use the table of contents here on the right to look up things you're looking for, things like images, things like let's say you want tables in your project. I'm going to scroll to the very top again. Under components, you'll see different elements in here, different styles, badges, the numbers. Depending on your project, Bootstrap comes with a lot of different options. Components, you can have navigation, you can have things like page headers, thumbnail. I mean, the list goes on and on. Wait, let me just go back to the JavaScript panel. So the JavaScript panel will have things like a drop-down option for you, which is what we reviewed. You'll have, let's see, scrolling elements. You could have, this is really neat. So as you scroll here, you'll see each of these items get highlighted, so you know what section you're on. Very neat. So depending on your project, there's different solutions, lots of different solutions for you, for your project, without you having to do any external installation of any jQuery plugins, any JavaScript elements. It's all built in. It's just a matter of adding the correct classes to the right containers.